Hi and welcome to Data Structures and Java Classes. This is a coding tour. I'm Norman McIntyre. Let's get started. So as an introduction, in the previous coding tour, we used the Java fundamental data types. We were given a string in CSV format, and we parsed it into various Java fundamental data types. Here was how the header of the CSV file, we had the first, the last, the ID, the class, average, audit, and accessed. And you see an example there of John Doe and the values related to that. We found that the first and last we treated as a string data type. We saw the ID was an int data type. We saw the class, either a freshman or a sophomore, was a letter of either F or S. We saw the average was a double. We saw that the audit, whether you're auditing the course, was a boolean. And we saw the time as a java.time.Instant data type. So we had these sample string inputs. We had two sample strings, and the lines of the strings were terminated with a \n standing for newline character. So from the previous coding tour, we did all the work inside of main.java. In this coding tour, we'll make use of classes, of inheritance, and of interfaces. So go ahead and point your browser to REPL IT and start a new project. We'll call this the Java Class Code Tour project, and go ahead and create that again as a Java project. Your initial project will have the code that's pre-generated here. And of course, you click on Run, and it'll say Hello World. So that quick and easy way to get started. Let's begin this by creating string 1 and string 2. Now remember, as you're watching the video, you can pause it if you need time to type in the code. You can slow the video down. You can rewatch it multiple times. So here in our class main at line number 3, we have a private static string S1. And notice that's where we put this John Doe. We have our sample John Doe string. And then at line 5, we have an S2. And here we put our Sally Smith and the information related to Sally Smith. Notice at line 9, we print out that we've got a Java fundamental data types coding tour. That was really from the previous demonstration. And you might want to update that and say, now we're going to be using classes. And then from 11 and 12, we print out to show how the strings look here at the beginning. And you can see there on the output at the bottom right-hand side how that looks. Now we're going to combine these individual students into a single string with this newline separator. And so at line 14, notice I take string 1, that is S1. I concatenate a system.line separator. So that gives me the line separator, which on a Linux system would be this \n. And then I also concatenate S2 and then concatenate the line separator on that. And then just to confirm that I've done that, I print out this string called students, and we see that indeed the students has both of those printing out. So at this point, we have our input string in the format required. So time to map the fields into a Java class. So we have these sample string that we saw earlier. And what we're going to declare is a class called student. So notice I have Student.java. And the Student.java is going to be a class called student. Notice we're going to have, as our first pass through this, we put the data types. For example, line number 2, we have a string is first. Line number 3, string is last. We see line number 4, the ID is an int. We see line number 5, char is a CLS. Notice I had to name it CLS because the name class is predefined. So I named it CLS. Line 6, we see we have a double of average. Line 7, we see a boolean that's audit. And line 8, we see a java.time.Instant, which was accessed. Now past 2, we go ahead and put private in each one of these because we know one of our key concepts is within a class, it wants to provide data abstraction so you can't see the data, so it's hidden. And we do that by putting private in front of that. We also are going to have at line number 10 a constructor. And notice for the constructor, for a student in this case, we're going to pass into it a string, and the string will be CSV. So we'll pass that into this. Also notice at line 14, we know that all objects, all classes inherit from the object class. So we're going to override, in this case, the toString method so that we can output information. For pass 3, we do parsing in the constructor. So notice at line number 10, we have our string come in. We see at line number 11, we have a string array of values. And we get those values, we get that array of values by going to CSV and doing a dot split. So this CSV is a string. The string has a method called split, and we split it based on where the comma is at, because we know that CSV is comma separated values. Once we've split them, notice it becomes a straightforward manner at line 13 to have values of 0 assigned to first, at line 14 values of 1 assigned to last. Now it's interesting, notice at line 15 we can't just assign it direct. Instead, we go to our java.lang.integer and we use a parseInt. Now the reason we call parseInt is because values of 2 is actually a string. Also, notice we trim it. So we take values of 2, which is a string, and we know that in this comma separated format, it may have spaces either before or after that. So by calling .trim, we trim out those spaces. So java.lang.integer parseInt, we trim out the spaces. So that means the parseInt only gets the value that's left after it's been trimmed. For line number 16, notice the same type thing. We go to the values of 3 in this case. We trim it. That again, that's to get rid of the either leading or trailing spaces. And then we do char at index 0, because that's where we should have a character that tells us whether you're a sophomore or freshman. At line 17, we give the average by doing a java.lang double.parse double. So notice this double class has a parse double, and in this case we do the values of 4. Again, we're careful to trim it first. At line 18, we do the values of 5, we trim it again. And at line 19, we do the values of 6, and we trim those, and of course then we do a parse. Now notice, slight difference between 17 and 18 doing a parse double versus line 19, we just said java.time.Instant.parse.